Alright, YouTube, it looks like people finally, because at least Fox is talking about it, and CNN a little, honestly, people are finally beginning to ask the big question, what the hell was going on with the DNC operatives on the O'Keefe tapes? What the hell is going on with WikiLeaks? The Mo Russia defense is beginning to break down. The must-stolen data, must-stolen footage stuff is beginning to break down, and culminating with Donna Brazile being sort of cross-examined by Megyn Kelly last night right after the debate. Donna Brazile never actually answered any of the questions that were posed to her and instead devolved into spouting a bunch of fake-as-fuck, nonsensical religious language. Oh, you come in like a thief in the night to take our files, to take our emails. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You don't even know who was responsible. Everybody at this point understands that that's the fact. You don't know that it was the Russians, but let's assume that it was. Who gives a damn? Read what's in the materials. This is the same person. I'll say this. It's important to remember, Donna Brazile is the same person who tried to stop people from looking at WikiLeaks material by saying there might be malware in it. So her word isn't necessarily worth its weight in gold at this point, but when she's asked specifically about awareness of what Creamer and Fovel and these others were doing, asked to comment on the content of the WikiLeaks emails, what did she do? She started talking about, oh, I'm not going to justify the stolen materials and so forth. When a politician, in any capacity, doesn't straightforwardly answer a question, then you can assume that the negative answer that most people would ever gauge is the true one. For instance, when Trump was examined about his positions on abortion, Trump is not against abortion. He pretended that it was a states' rights issue, but he deflected from the question. He did that because he doesn't want his evangelical fans not to vote for him, his core supporters to jump off of his campaign. Therefore, I know what Trump's actual views are. They've been reasserted multiple times if you know anything about how politicians tend to speak when they don't really want to tell you the truth, but they also don't want to tell an outright lie. They deflect and start talking about something else. When Clinton was asked, for example, another example, about whether she would fire on a Russian aircraft if it violated the U.S. no-fly zone she wants to set up in Syria, she never answered the question. That indicates to me, yes, the answer is affirmative. She will fire upon Russian aircraft if they dare to violate a U.S. no-fly zone, which is about the most terrible and apocalyptic idea that one could possibly concoct given the world scenario the way it is right now. These are their true positions. Hillary wants, apparently, a war with Russia. Trump doesn't care about abortion. He also doesn't care about gay marriage, but he's not nuts enough to tell the other Republicans that that's how he feels. They could have looked back at footage of him speaking from the 90s and they would have deduced the same thing. Unfortunately, his same fake statement is now being used as fodder against him by the Democrats, which is actually pretty funny because they're barking up the wrong tree if they want to have a boogeyman on abortion to go after. But Donna Brazile takes the cake because she did this not once but twice in the span of a fairly short conversation with Megyn Kelly. She won't answer any questions pertaining to WikiLeaks. She won't comment on whether there was a connection, whether the DNC was aware of what Creamer and Fovel and Vargas and all these others were doing. The reason she won't comment is because it's true. She knew what was happening. She did, by the way, in a third line of questioning here, she did forward debate questions to Hillary Clinton before the second debate. We can prove that now. Because she won't answer the question. If the answer is no, the politician will say no, absolutely not, because there's no way that that's going to come back to haunt them. But if the answer is yes, you don't want to answer yes, because then you've just outed yourself. In Donna Brazile's case, it means that she basically threw the entire second debate. She doesn't want to get fired from her cushy position as the head of the DNC. Why in hell would she admit to doing such a thing? We know she did. Common sense tells you she had in the Podesta emails, she had the questions verbatim because somebody leaked the question or questions to her. She forwarded it to the Hillary campaign to get her ready for the second debate, which is a breach of the rules of the debate commission. She did this, and she didn't deny it. She simply stopped talking about it and started launching off into a frenetic stream of biblical language. that generally speaking I would associate with a hardcore evangelical Tea Partier when caught out in a scandal. It was very funny to see somebody pretend to be a hardcore religious nut, ranting about Jesus and praise God, and I pray no one steals my emails, and you're coming like a thief in the night, lurking around the offices to grab the emails, to take tape of people what's she smoking here? Nobody's taken in by your fake religious speech, number one. I'm not sure who you're trying to fool. Considering the fact that many of these same individuals appear not to appreciate Catholic voters. They don't appreciate evangelicals. They have a hard-on, it seems, for interfering with these groups. I'm not surprised that they're heavily against the Democratic Party. Let me say in closing one final thing after seeing the latest Arizona poll that shows Hillary up 4 points. The oversampling of Democrats in that poll is so absolutely uncoupled with reality that I can no longer perhaps even trust the state-by-state polls. I want to, because in the past there's been some semblance of fairness, all things considered, in many of these polling firms. But what I'm seeing is when I look at the Podesta emails, and I see that he is openly talking about trying to oversample Democrats, specifically in Florida, and number two, to oversample female voters, whether they're Democrat or Republican. When I see that, and then I see the samples that are being used in some of these polls, not all of them, but some of them, I say that's not reality. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Who here thinks that Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in the state of Arizona? Is this a sensible thing to assume? No, that poll is bogus. It should be thrown out. I hope it's not being aggregated on RCP. They should know better. Perhaps we need to start looking at the sampling specifically of all of the polling firms and determine which ones line up with reality. I do not think there's going to be 20 or 30 points more Democrats voting in this election than Republicans. I think that that's a way out there theory that couldn't even have been concocted by somebody with Jimmy Carter's intelligence and Clinton's moral integrity. Even such a person would know that that's not actually what's going to happen. To see the head of the DNC attempt to deflect 3 different times in a short conversation, albeit with Fox News, which the DNC doesn't necessarily get along with them as well as they do maybe Anderson Cooper or Lester Holt or somebody like that. To see her deflecting, to see that last night Clinton deflected, I think, 5 or 6 different times on these and similar questions. To see Tim Kaine deflecting on these questions. To see Vargas deflecting when questioned apparently on Twitter. When I see this amount of deflection, I say they are very worried. They're very worried that somebody has some sort of silver bullet to their entire movement on tape or in an email, and they're worried about it being leaked, which is why they're doing everything in their power to discredit the leaks now, because they're awaiting it at some future day. For instance, if O'Keefe actually has a tape of Hillary Clinton rambling about black people, do you think she'll be elected to the presidency? It won't matter what Trump has said. It won't matter his debate performances, whatever happens to be the case, they won't matter anymore. She'll lose. It won't matter what the skew you use in your sampling for the polls. The polls will begin to, at that point, reflect reality. I do think there's a hidden base of Trump supporters that aren't shown in the polling. I don't think that it's considerable enough to get him up 10 points. But when I look at the polling methodology in some of these firms, and I say that's fairly obviously not reality, it doesn't make any sense, then I say, well, perhaps I should begin ignoring some of these polling firms. There's a reason why ABC's last round of polling is the only one that I thought came close to the mark. It showed Clinton up 4, that seemed sensible. Polls showing Trump up 2 or 3 points. It was primarily Rasmussen, which I don't trust, and LA Times, which I question, although, again, closer to reality perhaps. NBC and CNN showing her up 10, 14 points. No. The polling methodology was wrong, and it's coming from a source we now know absolutely to be biased in favor of Hillary Clinton. Why would I trust it? That being said, again, I will echo this sentiment one more time. Stop talking about voter fraud and use the term electoral fraud. Because voter fraud in people's minds equates to an illegal immigrant voted, a dead person voted, or a felon voted. and they did it with their own specific political bent of their own accord. Electoral fraud means that groups of people were coerced into committing fraud. They were bussed around to a competitive area from a solidly blue area or something along those lines. That's what the O'Keefe tapes show is happening now, and has, in Creamer's words, been happening for 50 years. There should be, by the way, a congressional investigation. They should call Fovel and Creamer and Vargas and all these others before them, and they should question them. I have no reason to believe that these tapes were selectively edited, because it's fairly cut and dry what's being discussed on these tapes. Doesn't appear to be any manipulative editing, in my opinion. When the CNNs and MSNBCs try to deflect on this issue too, say, well, we're not reporting on these because we still have to vet the material, that's obviously false. They never vetted, even for a second, the Trump tape. They never vetted any of the claims and allegations made against him by various females, some of which he claims he never even met. Since those didn't need to be vetted, neither would O'Keefe's videos if they were being fair. They either are in the business of vetting material before they report on it, or they don't care about vetting it. It's clear that they're selectively vetting material at this point, in many of these firms, not all of them. CNN, of course, did talk about O'Keefe's tape, with a little bit of a disclaimer involved, but they did report on it. It's more than we can say from NBC. It's more than we can say for Salon or Politico or any of these other groups. So I will give them credit for that. And Anderson Cooper increasingly looks like a defeated man. I don't think that the snap polls, by the way, from CNN line up with reality. YouGov doesn't seem to, YouGov, again, wildly disagrees with CNN's snap poll with their own, that nobody's questioning the methodology of on either side. It shows Clinton slightly leading among voters overall, but it also showed a 20-point advantage for Trump among undecided voters that were watching, which is really where the truth is, because if you're not an undecided voter, you went into the debate supporting Clinton or Trump. You came out supporting the same person. Nothing's going to change your mind at this late a date in the game. The undecided voters, though, they're still malleable. If they're saying that Trump had a much better night, which is what I said, that's not great news for Hillary Clinton. And one last time I will say this before November. I am not making a prediction as to who will win the presidency. I am saying Trump has a continuous systemic advantage because of all the dirt on Hillary Clinton that has apparently been obtained and is being leaked over time. It's having an effect. It affected the third debate quite significantly. About half of the core of the debate really revolved around how she was dishonest. That's a major effect. It's beginning to seep into the mainstream legacy media. When people say that there's no effect from it, I say they're clearly wrong. They're obviously not paying attention to the legacy media. I don't usually use the legacy media as sources of info because I don't trust it, but you can at least look at whether they're reporting on something and how they are. That's the proper way to go forward. Aggregate your news somewhere else, preferably get it from local sources, smaller sites. Internet-only news sources are more fair at this point than anything on TV. It's actually rather funny. Howard Stern's a better source for news at this point than like CNN. That's about all. Peace out.